Is a divorce on the horizon in Raptor land? And Masai Ujiri says there will be no more selfish play. We're here to break it all down from Toronto Raptors Media Day. Justin Pooni, Noor Zainab. What an interesting morning it was, because the Toronto Raptors are back in town just for a day. They're going to head off to the best place in the world, Vancouver, British Columbia, tomorrow to open up training camp, where they'll play their first preseason game against the Sacramento Kings, live from, once again, the best city in the world, Vancouver, British Columbia. Noor, let's break it all down. But the big elephant in the room, or the big thing in the room today, was Pascal Siakam and Masai Ujiri's not so pleasant exchanges through the media. Pascal was saying, he wants to just win games. He says he's a Toronto Raptor for now. Reports from Mark Stein also came out that OG Anunoby is expected to test free agency. Masai Ujiri, when asked about Pascal Siakam's contract extensions, talked about there was a lot of selfish play last year. Let's see what happens this year. I'm going to pose this to you. Mm-hmm. Is this the beginning of the end of the Pascal Siakam era in Toronto?
Oh my goodness. I think this is how I feel about the Raptors and Pascal Siakam. I think it's okay to want to trade him. It might even just be better for him to go somewhere else and kind of have a change of scenery. And he mentioned, one thing that got to me was him mentioning in the presser how he was going to have his first season really in the NBA without Fred VanVleet. They played together pretty much their entire NBA adventure. They were there together in the G League. They got to the Raptors together. They won a championship together. And then now they're going to be, I think that was the first divorce. They're going to be broken apart. Mm-hmm. And he plays in Houston this year while Pascal plays in Toronto. So I think that factor there just showed how much he was going to miss Fred to begin with, and how things just transpired behind the scenes, but how all these guys have such deep relationships with everybody else. But I think it also just showed that Pascal knows that his time, he probably knew all along his time could be up, because he's been in so many trade talks constantly. But it was tough. And I think with Masai, with Pascal, even with Scottie was asked about the selfishness last year that was happening on the court, and his answer to that, really, you could tell how drained he was, because he's like, it's so draining. Sometimes it feels like every man for himself out there. And I think if you're a Raptors fan who was watching that basketball last year, it really did feel like it was everybody for themselves. It was a lot of iso ball, not a lot of passing, a lot of guys just looking to make their mark on the court and get themselves a big payday, which they're kind of due for now at this point. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it was I don't think many questions were answered, though. There was a lot of questions. I think, honestly, the media asked, in my opinion, probably in different variations to Masai about how he thinks now this team is going to change. Mm-hmm. Next season, when he's calling them out for being selfish. And to me, it just seemed like he was dodging that question constantly, and so was Darko. But at the same time, Darko has no experience with this team just yet, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I think it was tough, and you could tell that they were just coming off of having a rough year, and they understand the expectations are now there this season, and there are some answers that need to be some questions that have to be answered, and Bobby not being there shows that Masai understood that.
But he should be the man to answer the question.
I know, but that's why Masai was the one who showed up.
The buck stops with Masai Ujiri, right? Yeah. The way I kind of took this Siakam and Pascal relationship right now is that when you look at it, it's kind of like when you're in a relationship with somebody, what the inevitable is going to be, it's going to end. But you have like a wedding and like a birthday party, and you have these events lining up where you kind of have to just play nice and get through that. And then you can, cut bait. So that's what I thought about when I saw this, is that it's clear that Masai and the Raptors were engaged in heavy trade talks with Pascal Siakam all summer. The deal probably was, rumored to be very close with Atlanta, but Siakam basically said, I will not sign an extension with the Hawks, then basically vetoing that trade. And then with Siakam knowing that the Raptors have him on the block, there's friction there, right? And then also no contract talks have started as well. So when I look at this, it seems to me that the inevitable is going to happen, that Pascal Siakam is either A, just going to play out the season and walk, and maybe a sign-in trade, right? So he gets the most amount of money, or the Raptors deal him during this season to a team that, might have an injury to a star or whatever, that want to load up. And then even Darko as well. He never really, I think he made reference to the fact that Siakam's still learning how to play the game. in one of his quotes, which you don't want to hear from your first-year head coach talking about your so-called best player on your team. That to me is a very big factor. And then also the other thing is you kind of mentioned as well with Masai, a lot of it was preaching. We didn't get a whole lot of answers, but what we did get was a whole lot of preaching patience, which is also code word for guys this season might not be a whole lot of winning, but just be patient, stick with us. So that's where I think the Raptors are. I think they realized that their offseason, they didn't make the big splash that they wanted to. Masai even mentioned, he gave that great speech at the end of his press conference saying, well, even though these guys don't want to play here, we'll find that one guy that wants to play here and stay here long term. We're still looking for that person. Talk about how basketball is a global game and how that might help Toronto. We'll see.
It's listen, I had 5 takeaways from this media day.
Okay.
And I listed them down. Here's what they are. I think number 1, Raptors, they said that the Raptors were apparently aggressive in their pursuit of getting Damian Lillard, Kevin Durant, Donovan Mitchell, any stars that were out there. But my rebuttal to that is, how aggressive were you if there was no OG or Scottie being offered in those trade talks? Not very aggressive, because it made more sense for that to happen. We saw what the Blazers got ultimately, and good for Joe Cronin, how he got that haul for Damian Lillard.
Andrew,
fantastic. And I think it made sense for all of us to wait and see how that was going to transpire, because a lot of people who spoke up in the beginning are now like, oh, let me walk that back, because he did fantastic on that end. And on the other part of it too was, it's pertaining to Freddie. There were apparently offers for Freddie from different teams. And either what happened here was Masai didn't think those offers were good enough, and he kept Freddie and knowing that, listen, this is a guy who bets on himself. If his slogan says bet on myself, there's a chance he might walk and not care what you have to offer him or what your history is like. But on the other side of it too, I think when Masai mentioned that he respects his players a lot, I wonder if he just respected Fred's request not to be traded to those cities because he didn't want to go there, which I think, as much as I respect the relationship part of it, business-wise, I don't think that's a good move. I think you've shot yourself in the foot, because you just allowed your all-star as well as your NBA champion to now walk away for absolutely nothing in return. Number 3, there was a lot of selfish talks from Masai, a lot of turning a new leaf, a lot of Darko is not going to be in charge. So let's see what happens with Darko. That's what I thought was happening in this conference. It was more so like, we have our guys that we want. Now we have a new coaching staff. We made the change that you guys wanted. So now I want to see how they play with Darko. But the other point that for me now is like, does that mean that those were shots at Nick Nurse? Because it showed that Nick Nurse wasn't able to do what he wanted Darko to do in this season. Was Nick Nurse the reason that the vibes were lost, that people were selfish, that they weren't able to have any kind of leadership in that locker room? So there was the little subtle jobs, as you mentioned as well. And then number 4, from Darko himself, get ready for a lot of ball movement. That again was another, a little kind of dig to Nick Nurse again, because we saw a lot of ISO. We saw a lot of guys playing constantly over time. Darko also mentioned that we're going to see a lot of rotations. He's going to be using the bench to their best abilities, because he mentioned that 82 games is way too long for an NBA season for any player. So he's going to have to kind of juggle that roster. And he really emphasized ball movement. Now, I know if you don't have the best, one of the best players, or if you don't have a superstar, it's hard to get that last shot, even if you're doing ball movement, because you kind of have to have a certain level of ball IQ to go with that. But ball movement, I think that's one thing I can say we could take as fans to be excited for, because, I mean, as much as I'm happy for Fred, the offense was stalled a little bit under Fred VanVleet. It
wasn't just him.
But he was running the offense, and the offense, if you're running the ball and it's 23 seconds, you still haven't passed the ball just yet, it's on you. And you passed it to a guy who's being doubled and Chris Boucher in the corner, and he can't get the shot in. It's not on Chris Boucher. It might be on the guy who's running the ball up. So as much as I love VanVleet, it's nothing to do with like the Raptors were bad because of him, but there was a factor there where the point guard position wasn't up to par as we wanted it to be. And then, last one, number 5, the Raptors are waiting and seeing about everything this season. It sounds like every contract, every extension, everything with Pascal Siakam, with Gary Trent Jr., with OG Anunoby, it's coming off as let's wait and see. And again, I think that's another kind of tip to Darko's system, because they want to see what this team looks like with Darko. I don't know if it's going to be tremendously different, but if you have two guys who are heading into contract, they're ending this year. Three guys, sorry, because we haven't heard anything about Gary Trent either. But if you have three guys who are heading into that and at the end of this year, I no longer think a new coach putting in a new atmosphere is going to be enough to see what these guys can do, because you have to sign them or trade them or they'll walk away for free.
So I understand what you're saying about Masai's telling with this wait and see thing, but you played that last year. I
never said I'm agreeing with it. I'm just saying that's their approach again this year.
Again, and I think that's a horrible way to go down, because you said last year that you wanted to give them one more push at the playoffs after the deadline. You got Jakob Poeltl. You wasted a first-round pick. You paid him way too much money, right? This now is time to just, cut bait. Look, Siakam clearly isn't happy right now. OG says he loves Toronto, but we know he's been clamoring through, the media and stuff like that from last year that he wants a bigger role. He's going to want to get more money. Gary Trent Jr., again, I think that's only positive that came out of this, because he said he actually had a whole lot of conversations with Darko throughout the summer. We never heard that with Siakam. So I think Gary Trent Jr. is a part of the long-term plans, but as for Anunoby and Siakam, could the grass be greener on another side? We don't know about that. That's why, as Masai, you can't make the same mistake again like you did last year. You can't keep VanVleet and out of loyalty or whatever, and then he just walks in the summer for the best price. You have to be proactive, figure out, this team, where we are currently situated within the Eastern Conference. We saw Drew Holiday go to Boston, Dame's in Milwaukee. That they're head and shoulders above everybody else in the Eastern Conference. You're not going to touch those. Then you got Philly. Now, Philly and Nick Nurse, they got their own problems. James Harden did not show up for media day. But you still have Joel Embiid. You still have Tyrese Maxey. Brooklyn, you have Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, another year of that young team. Ben Simmons claims he's back from what I don't know.
No, I agree, because I didn't like his comment about parity either today, because it's no longer parity means nothing if you don't have a roster to compete with parity.
You need to have a roster to compete with parity.
Exactly. And now too in the Eastern Conference, as you just mentioned, there's tiers now, but there's tiers now. You've got two teams in Boston and Milwaukee who you're like, they're gonna be fundamentally top of the conference each and every year, and that's called the tier. It's not parity anymore. It's called tiers. And then you have another level behind them who've got the other teams. The Raptors might fall in the fourth tier right now.
Honestly, they might, because look, let's do it right now. So you have Milwaukee, Boston, head and shoulders above everybody else.
They're head and shoulders.
Then you got the Knicks, the Cavs, the Sixers, the Heat, and then you got Atlanta, Chicago,
Philly.
Philly.
I wouldn't put Philly.
Yeah, we'll see what happens.
Third. You got no James Harden. Come on now.
Then you got then you put the Raptors in there. What about Charlotte with a healthy LaMelo Ball? They were a play-in team before. So what about Detroit with their young pieces?
Back, healthy
Orlando, right? Orlando's got some nice young pieces. So look, the Toronto Raptors are not in a good position right now, right? And I believe that what this season entails so far is that you can't just sit on your hands anymore, Masai. You got to be proactive. You got to be aggressive. You got to do things where, they might rub people the wrong way, but it's going to help the long-term success for the Toronto Raptors, because quite frankly, as we talked about last week, as this team is currently constructed, they're not going to do much, I think. And look, they talked about Dennis Schroeder and stuff like that, and I think he'll be good. But is a starting lineup with Gary Trent Jr., Dennis Schroeder, Pascal Siakam, Scottie Barnes, and Jakob Poeltl really gonna set fear in a whole lot of teams? I don't think so.
I think honestly, again, I don't want to knock those guys down, because we know individually they're very talented. Last year, their individual talent did not translate well on the court with everybody else around. But again, you can kind of chalk that up to I'm really
selfish play.
Selfish play, but it's also a lack of leadership. There was not a clear voice in the locker room letting these guys know what they need to do. And Masai could be that guy, but Masai's not in the locker room. The job of a GM is not to be, buddy with the players, giving them advice. He's supposed to do the transactional part of the job. So someone had to be a leader in that locker room. We had nobody. If anything, the vibes were just up in flames, because you saw people constantly fighting. I'm sorry, as great of a coach as Nick Nurse was, he gave us a championship. We will always owe him for that. But I just think in terms of leadership, we saw that there were problems with how he handled his relationship with the players, and that is what translated on the court. So I'm excited to see. I get where Masai's coming from in terms of you have a new coach now, a new leaf, a new system. So let's hope that he's able to get more out of these players. But at the same time, though, it's like no matter what it is, you still have to worry about the extensions because that's also a factor that's happening on the court. These guys are working for their extension. If those talks aren't happening off court, they're going to make them happen on court.
Yeah.
And on court, that means selfish play. So
Exactly.
unless they have these conversations that it's going to get the mindset straight of everybody else, I hope they turned the season around from last year, but it might not be that different.
Well, look, Fred VanVleet was known as the guy who had a whole lot of problem with the work ethic of the younger players, right?
Yeah.
He's gone, but Pascal Siakam is still there, and it was reported that it wasn't as heavy as Fred, but he also had an issue with the younger players and their work ethic.
I saw the reports. I don't agree with that though, because I know it was Fred and I know it was Nick Nurse. Okay, those two guys were the guys who had a problem with everybody else, and I don't think they were wrong in having that problem. It's the approach to that though. And you can shake your head, you can do whatever you want to, but a good leader understands how to get the most out of their people. It's not to demean them, it's to get the most out of them. And to go out to media every single day and talk shit about your players in the locker room and not tell them, I think that creates for a pretty sour environment.
But you look at guys like Nick Nurse and Pascal and Fred VanVleet. They went to work for everything, right? You look at and they see a guy like Scottie Barnes. Hold on. We're not going to go back on this too much. But you look at a guy like Fred VanVleet, undrafted guy, worked his way through the G League, always up to become through the rotation to become an all-star, right? From Nick Nurse had a coach in England, all of that, worked his way to become a champion. Hold on. And then you see Scottie Barnes, a 4th overall pick, not put the same amount of work in, it's going to get frustrating, right? Whether that's, again, it's a new generation. I agree with you on that.
It's not new generation. It's about the fact that there's a leader doesn't always have to be a good player, but a good player should know how to be a good leader. And that's what they were lacking. Fred's, his accolades, his credentials, his talent, you can't talk that off. He is amazing at what he does. But the issue is when he was trying to appoint himself as the leader after Kyle left, it was supposed to be Freddie who gets the keys to this franchise. He did not have the touch that Kyle did because he did not, his way to demand, no, come on, are you kidding me? He's got freaking traded.
It was different eras of Raptors basketball.
But Justin, it's about the approach of how you're leading the guys. Talking down to them is not leading them. That's what they did. That's what Freddie did. That's what Nick Nurse did. I love them. I'm happy for them. Thank you for the championship. But good luck now where you are at. Because what they did with the Raptors locker room, that was an issue. The chemistry was a massive problem. And I'm just upset that the Masai hasn't noticed that, because had he noticed that chemistry was an issue, those conversations about extension talks and all that stuff should have happened by now. And clearly, nothing has transpired with Pascal Siakam at all.
I think with the whole Siakam thing, I think Masai finally realizes that, look, I don't know if I want to pay this guy $200+ million next year. And at 30 years old and be like, he's 34, 35, and we're paying him $50+ million a year.
And that's completely
absurd.
Fine. Again, the whole the problem isn't you want to trade Pascal. Like you make the best deals for you. Just look at Joe Cronin. You make the best deals for your team. The issue is how you're going about it. That's the problem. And the way that the Raptors have treated Pascal, I'm not even sure that...
Treated him.
Sorry?
How do they treated him?
Well, yeah, the past year. He's in trade talks constantly. He's supposed to be the best player on the team. Okay, Justin, he's supposed to be the best player on the team. You're supposed to either give him help or trade him. And they've been letting him be in trade talks constantly the entire year to this date, to this point, and they've done wrong by him. You can't say that. Because he's supposed to be your best player. Either give him the resources to succeed or but give him the resources to succeed or trade him. Don't lead him on.
They're trying to trade him. He's the one who refused to sign with Atlanta.
That's not how a trade works, where you're just like, oh, DeJounte Murray wants to leave. Let's see what about Pascal Siakam.
No, but what happened?
You have to talk to your players, have a convo with them to say, hey, man, we might have to move you. Like those, again, we don't know if those convos happened or didn't happen, but the way that they've been happening in person, out in public, looks like they haven't been happening. And that's where the relationships come in. And I think those relationships just have not been taken care of properly.
I think Pascal realized that he's not wanted here anymore because, like you said, they tried to trade him, and he's the one who's put his foot down and said, no, I'm not going to sign an extension in Atlanta. So he knows they don't really want him and see him going forward. So that's going to be something.
Then how does that make sense if he wants to tank his value to Atlanta? Then he just
he didn't want, because he doesn't. He wants, the reason why is because he knows if he stays in Toronto, he could sign that way bigger contract because the Raptors have his bird rights with the CBA rules. If he stays in Toronto, he gets a whole lot more money than he would.
Which again, how can you blame him? It makes sense for him to do that, right? Then it's on Masai, it's on the front office, it's on Bobby to approach him with the factor of, okay, you've been in trade talks. We're probably going to change a new leaf now, figure out a new direction for this team. That means you may have to go. We got to get a good lump sum back for you. But those convos have just not happened. Masai said that today. Yeah. He hasn't had extension talks. And I think that's a disservice to a guy who brought you a championship. It is, Justin. You can roll your eyes, do whatever you want. Respect Pascal Siakam in this house.
But here's the thing with now.
Respect him.
Now what's going to happen is this whole season, for however long Pascal Siakam is wearing a Raptors uniform, is those contract talks are going to be throughout the entire season. The first 3-game losing streak. Okay, is it time to trade Siakam?
But that's what I'm saying. Like, that's why it should have been mended prior to, because you can't start. What I'm telling you, a lot of the Raptors' problems are off-court issues, and they just haven't been talked out.
There's on-court issues too. Shooting.
Yes. Okay, Justin. We know there's a lack of offensive talent sometimes. Okay, but the problem is, like, you can make that work together. It's just nobody wants to work together.
No.
That's the Raptors' problem.
Selfish was the theme this new season will be lack of selfishness, but we talked a lot today about contract extensions, trade rumors, a whole lot of talk about self and not about the team. And I think that's going to be a recurring theme throughout the Toronto Raptors this season.
Say that.
As I mentioned at the beginning, they will be traveling to the best city in the world, and maybe that will mend their fences. Go to Vancouver, get some sunshine. I think it's supposed to be sunny all week back home, but we'll see. And then look, maybe some Vancouver love
this has been Hoop Talks.
This has been Hoop Talks. We'll break down the Raptors training camp in Vancouver on Wednesday.
We'll actually be back also on Wednesday. I know we talked a little bit of crap about the team today, but we'll be back on Wednesday with a little bit of positivity. We'll give you 3 reasons each, Justin, myself, on why we should watch the Raptors this season. It might kill Justin. And honestly, he might not even be here for that kind of a rundown. But you gotta look at the glass half full sometimes. So
I got a couple surprises.
We'll be back with that perspective on Wednesday.
That's it. That's all for Hoop Talks.